Hey, welcome back to True-Moto-Resto, and I got some new project work in the shop. So this is off a TZ350, I think it is. This is all fiberglass bodywork. Belongs to a friend of mine, Mark, who I've done some paintwork for in the past. So all this is going to be painted white, I think. I'm not sure about the front fender, whether that's going to be white or red. And then this is an aluminum gas tank, handmade aluminum gas tank. So all this has to be kind of smoothed off. All the welds need to be smoothed off at the back here as well. And then there's a lot of imperfections. If you run your hand over this thing, obviously there's a lot of sanding and scratch marks in there, which is no big deal. But there's, you know, like here, there's a big flat spot right there. Little dings. I mean, it's quite well done, but it's going to take quite a bit of work to get that into a nice smooth condition. But it's been beat on pretty hard up here. But yeah, big divot right there. But it should look all right when it's finished. So the plan with that is I'm going to knock down all those welds. I'm going to put some epoxy primer on here, and then I can set about using some fillers to smooth it all out. But it's, you know, it looks, on the surface it looks better than it feels. Like I mean, it's, as I run my hand, there's a dimple there, high spot here, dimple here, dimple in there. This part is actually quite good. This is just rough. It's not, there's no little dimples in there. The only issue is going to be the weld. But yeah, those sides are going to be a little bit of work. This is the same sort of deal here. This is low spots, low, high, low, high, low, low all through here. This is higher than this. This has got all kinds of denting in there. There's a dent in the bottom of here, or an imperfection of some sort. Huge dents in here. Yeah, looks like maybe this had been, I don't know, has that been welded up there maybe? I don't know. Or blasted there, I don't know. It's kind of got a different texture to it. So yeah, that'll be some interesting work. I might see if I can push some of those dents out. Actually, if I can work them out from the inside a little bit with my dent removal rods. Less filler, the better. A little bit of body work to be done on the belly pan. It doesn't look terrible. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to start grinding down the welds on this tank. I did start doing it by hand with a hand file, but this is going to take way too long, so I'm going to use a 120 flapper wheel and just try to take my time. Don't want to go too deep or too quick with it, so let's see how this goes. Alright, so I got a lot of the welds knocked down. the challenge here is like the tank is so badly warped. So for instance here, you're getting fairly close to a level surface, but then it just kind of drops off. There's a big hollow here. For sure, this has been previously filled. There's filler remnants all over it, and it's been cleaned off. You can see some remnants of black paint in here. I don't know if some of it's been sandblasted. I think obviously it's been dented up before. My biggest concern, to be honest, is just how warped the broader side panels are here. I think the knee scallops here, as I'll call them, are not great, but I think they're going to be fairly easy to fill. This, on the other hand, is just really bad. Really bad. Same with this side here too. It's these two big side panel areas that are just going to be brutal. There's been a whole pile of weld in here as well, so obviously something has maybe punctured through here. It's been re-welded. Yeah, it's going to take quite a lot of work. All right, so before I get too excited about putting filler in here, I'm going to try my some of my PDR tools, see if I can use the pullers on. There's about 3 dents on this side, and then I'll move down here, see what I can actually pull out of this before I start filling. It's not going to work. It doesn't want to stick to the aluminum, so I'm going to try the rods. All right, so I'm going to try my these rods here. These for paintless dent removal, and we'll see. I just pick one, see if I can get the best reach to the parts that I need to push out, and see how that works. Okay, we'll call it moderately successful. I did manage to. There's a bunch of real big indents on both sides of the tank, and managed to get those out. And there was a couple of spots where the tank was kind of bellied way out, so I've managed to pop those back in. Of course, there's still a lot of imperfections here for sure, but it should be a lot easier to fill. The deviations are a whole lot less than they were. So we'll see how that goes. All of the welds have been ground down, so I'm gonna do a little bit more work. There's a few things here, like I couldn't get some of these really sharp creases out, so unfortunately those were not successfully removed. So I'll have to either take another shot at those, or I don't really want to have to fill. That's too much filler for my comfort. I don't want to have more than like 1/8 of an inch of filler in here if I can help it. So we may have to come back and give that another go, but slowly but surely we'll get there. It's just a matter of working the metal a little bit at a time. I'm not an expert panel beater by any stretch of the imagination, so a bit of a learning curve here. All right, so that's about as far as I can take the metal work with my skills and abilities and knowledge. And so basically all I've done here is I've ground down all the welds to a point where they're flush with one side or another. So, here it's flush with this side, over here it's flush with this side, and then there's a big dip in the middle. I've pushed out as many dents as I can, and I've hammered down any bulges that I can. So next step is to get this into the paint booth for a coat of epoxy. And then once it's been coated in epoxy, then I can set to work with some filler. All right, so booked into the paint shop for tomorrow. I'll get the epoxy on here, but just so you can see, the best part of this tank condition-wise is kind of inside the tunnel here. This is kind of fresh, undented, except for kind of right here where it looks like it was hammered to a clear part of a frame. But into here, it's dent free and fairly smooth. So I've just kind of rubbed this down with some Scotch-Brite and acetone so the epoxy will adhere. But even on the underside here, this is just, I don't know if you can see it, it's just wavy. Everything is wavy. Under here it doesn't matter so much because you're not going to see it. But I'm going to tape off the petcock opening, and then just so you can see what I've done on the top side here. So all the welds are ground down, and I went over everything with my level. No, it's not a level, it's just a straight edge, just to see where I'm touching. Make sure I can see a light gap between the various parts, and I don't have high spots on the welds. I need to touch this one up a little bit more, but I'm just kind of going over everything, just finding my high spots, like right there. That needs to be knocked down. So I'll kind of mark that, and I'll just kind of keep going back and forth till I can. Here we're not too bad. Here's good. And then all down the side here, I've also been checking it. But you can see, it's hard to tell here, but it's the back side of this. Like, so this isn't just kind of different colors. This is a dent, or where the weld was. Maybe it was kind of welded up the middle, I would guess. So these panels were, it was kind of welded up here, welded across and down. So there was kind of a back corner here, a back corner here. The top was in two pieces because I can feel the weld down the middle. That was done fairly well. The top of this, I think, is the best piece. I mean, up here there are dimples and whatnot to some degree. The worst, the front side sections here. This is, I mean, I've got most of it. The big bellies and the big dips are kind of gone out of here now, but it's still going to take a fair amount of filler to get it right. And then there's all kinds of little dings and dents, and so it's definitely been filled before and damaged before. Some big dings in here, and it's kind of rough in there. You kind of see the texture of that, and that, I believe, is sandblasting. And they were trying to, I think, sandblast all the body filler out of the deeper crevices. So, and it's possible, like some of these surfaces are quite rough as well, that they were, maybe it got warped from excessive sandblasting as well. But yeah, this is going to stretch my body skills to quite a degree, I think. I'm a little concerned. I hope I can sort this out for my buddy. I'm not really happy with how much of this tank is kind of bellied in on the sides. I'm going to try to hold it out a little bit. Moving. So I've got this kind of, this area here is fairly leveled out now, but there's still a bit of a dish right here. So my objective is to try to get in with this thing and kind of work it out. All right, so after working everything as much as I can, I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it. I've already got, I'm about 4 hours in. at this point, and yeah, I'm just kind of, this is the extent of my metal shaping skills to get it where it is. So off to the paint shop, get the epoxy on it. Once the epoxy's on, I can start the process of getting the filler on, and then it's the long process of sanding it. Right back from the paint shop, I put 2 coats of black epoxy primer on this, and so it's been about maybe an hour since I put this on, but it's basically dry to the touch, and I don't need to sand this stuff unless it's sat for 2 days or more. I can apply body filler and all kinds of stuff over top of that with no concerns. So what I'm actually going to do first is I'm going to go over all the seams and any of the kind of the larger dent areas, and I'm going to use this lightweight short strand fiberglass filler, and I'm going to mix it a little bit with some fiberglass resin just so it flows out a little nicer, and that will seam seal everything. And then once that's dried, I'm going to go over the top of it with a regular filler, and basically the entire tank is going to get a skim of filler on it, because it's just so rough. It just needs to be smoothed and evened out. So that'll be a ton of sanding to do, but it's really the only option. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so I've gone over all the main weld areas with the short strand fiberglass filler. A little bit of resin filled in there. There's a couple of dings that I wasn't able to get out with the dent remover, so I filled those in a little bit as well. So now I'm going to leave that to dry, and then I'll come back tomorrow and knock some of that down a little bit, and then start to fill the tank. Alright, so now we've got plenty of filler on here, and the idea being that this is kind of either my experience and or kind of what I've learned, or what I'm learning is I want to make sure I've got enough filler on here that I can flat this down, sand it down to the point where all the panels are as flat as they can be without kind of waves and undulations in them. And I want to be able to get to that point without hitting the metal, which is underneath. So I want to have the least amount of filler left, but I don't want to hit the metal underneath, because as soon as I do that, I got to stop and I got to fill it again. So I put, again, this is kind of against my, I won't say better judgment, but my practice many times has been to put as little filler on as possible, and then keep building up, sand it, build it up, sand it, build it up. And what I've learned from those who are more experienced than me is that takes way more time, and I'm probably not getting it as flat as I could get it. So this time I've decided to take the advice of those who know more than me and put more filler on, and then sand it down, flat it back as much as I can to leave the least amount of filler, but still have it flat, before I hit the metal. So the good news is, if I don't make it as the body shop hobbyist, I might have a career ahead of me in icing cakes. That's my assessment so far. So anyway, well, that's about the first hour of sanding with the DA and some by hand. So it's it's taking quite a long time, because I don't want to be I don't leave any more filler on here than necessary. So basically, as I said before, the plan is just to keep sanding until I start to hit the metal, which I've kind of started to do right there, and also over here a little bit. So that tells me that as this starts to get flatter, and there's still a few low spots, I need to add some filler there. Still got a ways to go on this side. Haven't really touched these knee scallops yet. They'll kind of mostly have to be done by hand because of the shape. And then this side has kind of a low spot right here developing. I still have to take more material off here, so but just starting to see metal just starting to show here, so that will likely require a little bit more filler depending on how all this kind of smooths off here. So there's still a little ways to go up here yet. So there's the tank. Still lots of sanding left to go, but yeah, in a couple of spots, as I mentioned, I started to hit some metal, so I had to add some more filler here and there, those kind of darker spots, and yeah, we'll keep going at it. I did apply some fiberglass repair to all of the plastic, well, no, to the fiberglass panels this morning, not to the plastic panels. So there's all kinds of small repairs, cracks and whatnot. I think this tail piece was by far the worst. It had quite a number of issues, so I had to fiberglass on the insides, the tail and outside, and I still have to strip this nasty pad off here somehow. But yeah, it's coming along bit by bit. Okay, so the TZ350 tank is getting closer and closer to being finished. The kind of lighter colored putty there is kind of, I'm hoping, is the last few spots of glazing putty and a few very kind of small, shallow, low spots that I have. And then this is kind of like the biggest spot on this side. It was still a little low, but yeah, it's getting close. And then once that's just sanded off, I'll give it a coat of just a light coat of primer just to see if anything else shows up. And then once I'm happy that there's nothing major left, I can do the primer filler on it. Just a little bit more sanding and a few spots to do, and then I'll put a final coat of quality high build primer on there. This is really just primer that I put on just so it helps kind of show up any of the imperfections before I put on well, I'll say the final product, but before I put on the expensive stuff, which will get sanded again anyway. The tail section, I stripped off the nasty seat foam that was on there, and I've done some of the fiberglass repairs, but there's still a few more to do. This up here is all cracked up really bad. Okay, so I got the fillers all sanded. I've marked a couple of spots on there with kind of that red surface putty. There's some very, very slight imperfections in there, so most of that will get sanded back off. And so it's getting there. So once all that has dried and I've finished the sanding of the filler, then all of this orange stuff will be wet sanded, and then I can mix up the high build primer and get that sprayed on. All right, so I'm just getting set up outside to spray the primer. And traditionally, I've just used kind of a regular rattle can primer, but in this particular case, I've elected to go with a quality primer, kind of a professional grade high build primer. So I want to make sure that these are looking good when they're all done. So okay, so here's what I'm using. Evercoat Feather Fill. It's a polyurethane primer. Heard good things about it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix half of that and half of the hardener in here. And then my buddy gave me this old paint gun. I was going to use my my good gun, my gravity feed gun, on these guys over here. But he just recommended I use an old gun, and I do have an old gun downstairs. It's kind of like, it's a suction feed like this one, but it doesn't have, it has only I guess it does have an external mixer on it. But he said take this one and give it a try. So I've cleaned it all up, took it apart, cleaned the outside of it, and we'll see how it works. All right, did a couple of coats. Everything's looking all right. A little bit of a wrinkling there. There must be a contaminant on there somehow of something. So that's going to end up having to get sanded back. But anyway, that's no big deal. That's what the part of the process. So I think I'm going to go mix the rest of that quart. And then once this has dried a little more, we'll give it another coat. Okay, so the primer's on. Everything looks relatively good. I mean, I did it outside, so of course, I think there's a mosquito right there in the paint, but that's fine. It'll sand out. And yeah, I did find a couple of blemishes here and there. So once you kind of get a semi-gloss thick layer of primer on there, you can kind of see a couple of things that would have been better to be filled beforehand, but this is all part of the process. So I found one little blemish on the other side of here there that I have to fix up, and then there's one down there on the front area of the tank that I got to fix as well. So just really small imperfections. So, but anyway, once all that dries, I think I'll put about four really good wet coats on there. And so the plan now is I will let that dry for a couple of days, and then it'll get wet sanded. I'll fix any of those blemishes that I found, and then I'll just give it a quick shot of rattle can primer over top of those when I put the filler in, and then it'll be ready for paint. So all the parts are now ready for the paint booth. I sanded down all the high build primer. It kind of goes on. It's a bit of a kind of an orange peely texture, I guess I would say, once it goes on, but all the imperfections are gone. I did find a couple of tiny little pinhole imperfections. I've got some surface filler in there that'll get sanded and primed one more time. And I found a couple of really small imperfections on the bottom edge of the tank there, which it's just kind of ink inconsistencies in the finish. So I've got most of that will get sanded off again, but that's like 10 minutes work to finish that on the bottom edge of that tank, and then hopefully later this week we'll be off to the paint booth. All right, so there's the front fender first coated red base on. I'm going to give that one more coat, and then it'll come back out of here and we'll get all the other stuff set up for the white. All right, so there's the first coat of white. So one more coat of white, and then we'll bring the fender back in, and then it could be clear coated. I do have to put a decal or two on here first. Had a bit of a mishap here. I'm not exactly sure what happened to the paint, but something kind of reacted funny. So that spot right there is me touching it before it was dry, but all around it, looks like the paint has reacted and kind of shrunk back or whatever. So now I'm gonna have to leave this for 3 hours and come back, sand that, and then re-blow that in again. And then I've also got a little tiny run right here, which I'm going to have to come back and just give that a light sanding, and then I'll have to dust that in with white paint again, and then have to build this back up as well with white. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to go home and then come back in about 3 hours. All right, so a few hours later, I ended up just putting a slight thin smear of filler, glazing filler on that problem area, and then we waited for that to dry and sanded it. And there was a couple of pinholes up here that we found that I missed, so they've been filled in, and hopefully that'll be good to go. We very lightly sanded out the little run that was in there, so that's fixed. So now we'll finish the white on these little spot repairs that we have to do, and then get some clear on it. All right, so the Yamaha decals are on. The panel reblown in. So now I think we're ready for the clear coat. All right, that's the first coat of clear. One more coat, and then we're done. I always find this is the most nerve-wracking part because I don't want to get any runs at this stage. All right, there we go. We're all done. Came out pretty nice. I'm very happy with that. No runs. It's not that I've seen. Job's a good one. All right, so I've got all the body work back home, and I gotta say I'm really pleased with it. It came out really nice. Came out really, really well. I have to, the only thing I'm gonna do now is I'll take a razor blade and just etch around the bottom here when I take the tape off, because if there's any bridging around here, I don't want it to pull the paint up. So I'll take that off. I'll then wait a few days and I'll do put some tape around here when I go to mount the cap back on, so I don't scratch the paint. Put the breather cap back on here, and then also the petcock underneath. And then she's ready to go. So yeah, very happy. Looks good. Turned out really well. And yeah, the paint finish and the clear coat went on really, really, really nice. And I'm really pleased with the results on the tank. I have to say I was a bit worried when I started working on that. It was so bad, but it did turn out really well. And I picked up a tip. Every time I go to my buddy's place, who's a professional body and paint guy, I use his booth. I always come away with something useful, so I'll pass it along. So you saw when I did the tank, I put the filler on it, and then I've always left the filler for a day, and then I would go back the next day and spend, you know, countless amounts of time sanding the filler off. And he said, no, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is, he said, don't do the whole tank at once in this particular case. In the future, he said, do one side of the tank. And then he said each filler has kind of a flash time or a working window. So it'll get to a certain hardness that it's not hard as a rock, but it's hard enough to either use like a cheese grater on or the sanding on, and it will come off much easier. If you leave it overnight, like I've been doing, it'll be really difficult to sand, which obviously I've experienced. So I've learned about the working window and the different fillers have different working windows, and depending how much hardener you put in it and that kind of thing. So that's something that I didn't know, or didn't really, maybe I did kind of realize to some degree, but it never really registered. Put it that way. I always thought you had to leave it so it was good and hard, and that's not the case. So learning a little bit about the working window, and then he also recommended that I pick myself up one of those cheese grater type of bodywork files, which when you're kind of working with the first level of smoothing off the filler, it goes a lot faster than just using the sanding paper. So basically the cheese file, and then going to like 40, and then on to maybe an 80 or a 120 is the way to go. So there, I've learned something. I passed that along. As I said, I'm just kind of a fledgling body and paint guy here, learning as I go. But the good thing is I'm actually learning something. And I have to thank my buddy Alan for his patience and sharing of his knowledge. He's a teacher, a really good teacher. So thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I'm hoping that I'm going to get back to finishing that CB900F really soon. Hopefully this week. I mean, the weather's been reasonably good, and I've been out getting the farm work finished, so this has just been kind of sitting here waiting for me to pull my finger out and get those carbs back on. So coming soon. Stay tuned.